We're about halfway through 2024 and we've already had some pretty huge reveals in the RPG space. What initially looked like it could be a lean RPG year after the breakout success of Baldur's Gate 3, well, it's actually looking pretty damn good. So I guess I don't really need this emotional support pickle that my wife got me that says, you know what, you are a big deal. I'll just put it safely over here. We have a surprise RPG announcement, a massive long-awaited sequel, a major turn towards CRPG for an RPG trying to establish itself, and one incredible-looking Victorian steampunk fantasy RPG that may be slipping beneath the radar just a little bit too much. 2024 may turn out to be a year of contrast, but also a year that provides a lot of varied RPG types for many different people to enjoy. Different settings, different gameplay styles, and all just a lot of RPG goodness that we can really be excited about. Let's start with Greedfall 2, The Dying World. Greedfall is getting a sequel 5 years after the initial title, but things are going to be changing in this game. Set 3 years before the events of the first game, in the sequel, you'll be returning to the colonial world as a native of Tir Fradee, uprooted and taken to the continent of Gasain, all in a bit of a reversal of the first game, but still embroiled in a deep conflict amidst different factions where you will need to use diplomacy, cunning, or combat with the help of your allies you make along the way to survive in the old world. Greedfall was set in an unusual setting for an RPG, mingling the Age of Discovery with magic in a 60-hour campaign of morally complex quests that bounce you off themes of colonization, religion, and politics, all to the steady background of gunpowder and explosions, as well as some pretty creepy looking monsters. It was a game IGN was bold enough to say in their review that reminded them of the mid-2000s BioWare games, which isn't particularly surprising given that that era of BioWare was hugely influential to the studio making this game, Spiders. One knock on Greedfall though had been the combat, and admittedly when I played it years ago I felt the same way. It wasn't super engaging combat, it was just kind of a straightforward hack and slash that was a bit rough around the edges and not quite dialed in. So it's not surprising that that was the #1 thing they sought to change for the sequel. What is surprising is just how far they're going in changing that, which should be music to a lot of fans' ears if they're particularly fans of the CRPG subgenre, if they want a bit more tactics. Greedfall 2 is doubling down on that old BioWare adjacent premise because they're switching it up from an action-oriented RPG to a companion-focused, real-time with pause CRPG. Developer Spiders has been open about how heavily inspired by BioWare they were, and now they're bringing even more of that old-school goodness to their new series with almost deliberate emulation of Dragon Age Origins-style tactical combat with this title. You'll be able to toggle between different characters in Greedfall, those companions you can romance or piss the hell off, with non-linear endings to the adventure that really mean that your choices are going to matter. This has me more interested in the sequel than I would have been if it had simply mirrored the same gameplay of its predecessor. It has me eager to see just what Spiders has to offer with this new iteration. And quite honestly, it's hard not to link this change that they're making with Greedfall and the change that BioWare is making with Dragon Age the Veilguard, which we'll get to in just a little bit. Because even down to the companions, those things are kind of the inverse, with Greedfall upping their companions from 2 to 3 in this new game, while BioWare is lowering their companions from 3 to 2 in their game, with a lean into more action-based combat for the Dragon Age game and lean into the old CRPG style real-time pause combat for Greedfall. There's just one huge catch here with Greedfall 2. It's not actually fully releasing this year. It's going to be releasing into early access, but it's still a game that I'm so excited to check out that I figured it was worth putting on this list, but just temper your expectations accordingly. But continuing on with our gameplay change theme, let's hop over to Avowed. Avowed is a first-person and third-person RPG. Yes, you did hear that correct. If you hadn't seen the most recent update from Avowed, you will have both first-person and third-person options going into the game. It is set in the same world as the Pillars of Eternity CRPGs, Aora. And yes, this is another game making a big change in how it's played, just in kind of the opposite way. While the Pillars of Eternity games were lauded and appreciated as big CRPGs, Avowed is moving away from that. It is a game that is stepping away from the tactical CRPG style and going for something more action-oriented with clear inspiration from other first-person RPGs like the Elder Scrolls series or Might and Magic Dark Messiah. You enter the world with all the potential to be a huge dick, if you choose to be. You're an interloper in a remote part of the world of Aora called the Living Lands, and you've come from your large empire, which is always a great thing, right? To investigate a mysterious plague. Only problem is, you're really unwelcome and unwanted. The inhabitants of those lands aren't very happy you're there. You know, because like imperialism and all that tends to be a bit of a downer sometimes. Also, kind of seems to be a theme in a lot of these RPGs on this video. Avowed's initial reveal at the Xbox showcase stumbled a little with combat, but since then they have been working hard on it and actually had a new reveal, and it looks like Obsidian has been doing a lot to really address the key things. The lack of weightiness, the lack of impactfulness it seemed to be with combat. It actually looked pretty damn good in the most recent showcase, much improved from what it had been before, as well as showing off much more dynamic settings and more interesting locales. But with all those diverse locales, the RPG is still looking for a smaller scale experience. Skyrim, this is not. Instead of a broad open world, they're aiming for a more confined but impactful story. As Obsidian CEO Urquhart told PC Gamer, "We want to tell more confined stories that the player can experience with their companions, and then move from part of the world to part of the world." Speaking of companions, not only will they be part of the game, but they're going to matter quite a lot. But if you're looking to bang the Fishman or other companions, you'll be shit out of luck and you'll need to actually jump into our next game, because Avowed will not have any romances. I think it's actually the only game on this list that doesn't. Now this next one guarantees at least a little bit of spice in the comment section, because depending on which corner of the internet you're on, BioWare is either completely back and we all should be super excited about Dragon Age the Veilguard, or they should close up shop because everything you saw in that 20-minute video means the game is shit. Either way is probably way too soon to make up your opinion on a game where you haven't really seen that much of it. However, I have gone from neutral to cautious optimism to really just generally being excited about this game the more we get revealed about it. Not just in gameplay reveals, but the more we get revealed about how the combat system is going to work, how companions are going to work, and how your character specializations are going to work. Naturally, on the combat, I'll still be on the fence until I actually get to play it myself, but Dragon Age for me has always been the most about story and companions. And for me, once I had that moment of witnessing how Varric was talking to Solus in that little gameplay reveal we got, and some of the things that happened there, I'm trying to be a little vague here just in case you want to stay completely spoiler free, but damn, I was invested. I was like, I gasped at least once. You know, I'm in it. I'm there. Dragon Age Origins is the game that sold me on the universe of this game, and I actually really enjoyed the real-time pause combat, and I think it is my favorite combat of the series. And that type of combat, despite being different, is probably what eased me into a game like Baldur's Gate 3, which I really, really freaking loved. But I actually actively disliked the combat in Dragon Age Inquisition, the most recent Dragon Age game. So really, anything that's a bit different from that, I think will make me pretty happy. And just a quick PSA for anyone who is planning on going back and playing Dragon Age Inquisition, here's two things that might make your experience a little bit more fun. If you want to, there is the ability to add a auto attack function instead of having to hold down your attacks for your basic attacks. You just do it in the keybind section. It's not actually bound to anything when you start the game, but you can make it bound to something so that actually plays more like Dragon Age Origins. Also, You do not have to complete every single thing in the hinterlands. Follow guides. It's rough. That's how the game starts you out. It's just, you don't have to do it all, I promise. And you actually may want to go play Dragon Age Inquisition and the DLC that followed it, because it's very key to the rest of the story that we're getting in the Veilguard. Dragon Age the Veilguard will pick up 10 years after the events of Inquisition and the Trespasser DLC, delving heavily into the story of Solus, but more specifically, the Veilguard, the group of companions you bring together to, well, guard the Veil. You'll play the role of Rook, a completely customizable protagonist who can be a mage, rogue, or warrior with 3 specializations to each of those class roles, giving a total of 9 specializations. But there's more to it than that, as the creators of the game have pointed to Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy XII for the inspiration of their web-like skill trees, which allow you to specialize your characters how you want. Final Fantasy X had one of the most rewarding specialization webs, so if they can capture even a fraction of that, I'll be pretty happy. Like some of the previous titles in this list, Veilguard will be aiming to be a more confined story as well, instead of a broad open world, going as far as to publicly state that there is no hinterlands here. Open world RPGs are great if they're full, something BioWare hasn't shown they can do lately, so I'm glad they're being more focused and making a story with more intent this time around. There will, however, be some changes with this game that are more controversial and less positive, all specifically around companion control. Dragon Age, for the first time, will not be letting you directly control your companions by swapping over to them. You'll still be able to pause the game and queue up actions with yourself and your companions, but those options will be more limited than ever before, and you'll only be bringing 2 companions with you at any time instead of 3. This may be one of the largest complaints I've seen, and it's often being compared to as the mass affecting of Dragon Age. The trade-off is that they've tried to make the combat of your primary character more engaging. In the gameplay trailer, we get to see a duelist specialization swapping between melee attacks, ranged attacks, and abilities, while altogether looking more active and far less stationary. Really, the verdict on whether this was a good move or not is just going to have to wait until most of us get our hands on the game and get to see for ourselves. But moving back to the pure positive side of things with BioWare, they have stated that there's not going to be any bullshit microtransactions, that this isn't some attempt at a live service game. I mean, they already cut out the multiplayer parts of it, and they're trying to just make a good single player RPG, which after some of the more high profile failures in trying to do the opposite of that, and having so much bullshit with monetization just in general in every kind of game lately, it's at least somewhat rewarding to hear that they're making an effort not to do that. Of course, we'll just have to see how true that is, because we don't have the packages yet that this game is going to be sold at, and if there's head starts or anything like that, or items or quests. But at least for now, they're saying the right thing. In perhaps the most surprising announcement of the year, we found out that not only was Kingdom Come Deliverance making a sequel, but that sequel is actually coming this freaking year. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 will return us to the part medieval sim, part RPG, all awesome, in-depth story of 15th century medieval Bohemia amid an ongoing civil war. You'll once again take on the role of Henry of Skalitz on his gripping tale of tragedy, loss, love, triumph, revenge, and throwing poop at people's houses.
What are you waiting for, soldier? Fire the trebuchet! For king and country!
For king and country, my ass. This is all good, clean, fun.
Nearly as good as having that traitor in the pillory. Nearly. Now that would be sweet.
That's for Sigismund.
Woohoo!
I wasn't kidding. That was a thing that you did in the game. You threw poop at people's houses. I'm not entirely sure that that's going to be in the second game, but they have actually done a very good job in Kingdom Come Deliverance of kind of taking some humorous moments and melding that in together with the less humorous moments, the more tragic, I want to bawl my eyes out kind of moments, the sad and heart-wrenching moments. God, dream sequences are bullshit, by the way. They hit hard. This RPG stands out for others on this list for a few reasons. The pains it takes to be authentic, from weaponry and combat to food consumption, crafting, and storytelling, to gorgeous forests and true-to-life castles and homes. As much medieval sim as it is RPG. To some, the game had a bit too much realism and micromanagement, not to mention challenging combat, but it also provides an incredibly engaging story and a satisfying gameplay loop once you get the hang of it. Not to mention that the world is so lovingly crafted with so much detail, it boggles the mind. The story Warhurst Studios tells through their game is one that will touch your heart or rip it out. Your decisions will matter, deeply so. And while you won't have the merry band of companions you get in the rest of the games in this video, there will still be plenty of memorable characters, allies, and enemies alike. It is a game that very obviously puts the performance of their actors front and center, so if you're looking for a bit of a cinematic experience, this is also going to be another one of those RPGs that really leans into it. This one is also perhaps one above the others on this list where you might be best suited by playing KCD1, the first game, or at the very least watching some kind of video or reading an article that kind of goes over the story so far, because this is a direct sequel of KCD. It will pick up the story right where the first game ended. Our last game on the list, though, is perhaps the one that is the least known. New Arc Line is an old school CRPG that should be getting a lot more looks than it currently is. I mean, just listen to this awesome pitch from Dreammate, who's making the game. Invent deadly gadgets or master the arcane arts. Fight, steal, or smooth talk your way to the top. Make foes and allies. Fall in love. Get involved in a massive conspiracy and influence the course of history. You intrigued? Because I sure as hell am, and I want to play this game. And that's before you even get to look at the game, which looks beautiful, dark, and tragic, mingling with a sense of humor, all within a world of Gilded Age magic and gadgets. In New Arc Line, you'll find yourself at the center of a crisis, refugees seeking salvation as you flee a terrible plague in the world of conflict, treachery, and bloodshed. You'll be able to take sides in this tactical turn-based single-player RPG as a hero, or as a villain, arcane, or steampunk, and you'll do so with companions by your side in this party-based, story-rich RPG. The trailers we've seen lean toward a darker RPG with very visceral scenes, terrible-looking monsters, and deplorable politics. A dark underworld beneath a gilded city that's just waiting to be explored, and I can't wait to delve into this world of dwarves, elves, magic, robots, Zeppelin, and technopunk gear. Especially as I eagerly await Season 2 of Arcane, and something about this game, something about this setting of this game, just makes me think of that amazing series. The game does not have an official release date for 2024 just yet, but it is still slated for sometime this year to launch on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series XS. So keep an eye on this one, and I certainly will too.